Welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. Are you over 40 and ready to truly thrive? Well, on this podcast, we go deep on ways to thrive across the 5 pillars of midlife: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. I'm Bernie Borges, midlife advocate, life coach, and your host. Subscribe now and get ready to thrive. Laurie-Ann Murabito, welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast, a maximum episode.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Bernie. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, thanks for accepting my invite, Laurie-Ann. Laurie-Ann, I invited you here to speak on a topic that I have not covered on the Midlife Fulfilled podcast before. So you are the first. And I'm excited about this topic. It's a topic that I thoroughly enjoy. We'll get into that a little bit. And I'm also inviting you to drill into this topic with me specifically. And the topic is, of course, speaking. You are a coach. You coach individuals, coaches, entrepreneurs about speaking. You help them become masterful speakers and earn a living from it. Everything from TED Talks to 60-minute keynotes and everything in between. You do coaching, you do programs, you've written books on it, and you are the host of what has become one of my favorite podcasts, the Be in Demand podcast. I told you before we started recording, Laurie-Ann, that I have been binge listening to your podcast because I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much. Do you have a favorite episode?
Boy, I'd have to look it up because you know what I did? I went back to, I think it was like episode 200 and I started from there. So I've listened to more than 20 episodes because I know at the time that we're recording this, I think you recorded or published rather episode 238.
Very good.
So I went back to 200 and I listened to about 20 or so there. It's just, you are providing a masterclass on speaking just through your podcast. And of course, you do this for a living. You help individuals do this. So what I've asked you to do, and you have accepted my request, is to unpack a program that you teach.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you call it the 7 blocks, or maybe that's not what you call it, but the program is comprised of 7 blocks to an in-demand signature speech.
Yes.
It's a program that's out there and it sounds fantastic. And you've agreed to really unpack those 7 blocks. So you want to get started?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. And I invite you to again, challenge me along the way on these 7 blocks. And I've agreed to be vulnerable, meaning I'm not going to BS you or anybody. I'm going to answer your questions or whatever challenge you give me authentically. All right, here we go.
Okay, let's get started.
So the first one is speaker confidence. What's that about?
Do you have the confidence to get up there in front of a group of people? Because if you're not confident, your audience can feel it. You know, and that confidence can be felt or heard with your pauses, with your ums, ahs, your tone of voice, even your body language, whether you're speaking virtually or you're in person. So do you have, what do you mentally think about, Bernie, just before you're about to start speaking?
Well, in my case, something that I learned many years ago. So a little bit of context here. I used to be very active as a speaker for the first several decades of my career. I'd say about the last 5 years, I haven't been as active. There's one conference that I speak at once a year, but mostly in the, let's say 2000, well, even the 90s through 2017-ish, I was pretty active. And what I learned, Laurie-Ann, is that I need to stand up before I'm introduced. I never want to be sitting down. I just kind of figured out that if I'm sitting down, there's this thing where I'm in the audience and then I have to transition to becoming the speaker. So once I learned that, I would never sit down. Before an event, I'm just standing the whole time. And even if everyone's sitting, I'm going to be standing somewhere until I'm introduced. And that
I
allows me to just get up there confidently.
I like that. So that's part of your pre-speaking routine, which is something that I share with people that adds to your confidence and builds your confidence. I do have a couple of clients who I do encourage them to sit in the audience, and they'll sit in the audience. Like one woman that I'm thinking of in particular, she speaks about coming from an abusive relationship. So she actually has the microphone. She's already worked this out with meeting planners. It's the way that she starts her meetings. And so she starts speaking in the audience
Okay.
because 1 in 3 women are abused physically or mentally. So she's saying, like, 1 in 3 women. That means somebody to your right or your left is
That's
being
powerful.
abused. Like, I'm the woman standing behind you at the grocery store. And so she has this beautiful intro, and then she stands up, and then people are looking around like, "Where is this voice coming
Right.
from?"
Right.
So that's sort of it your opening is also designed. I'm sort of moving from the speaker confidence into the opening now. Your opening is designed to get people to put their phones down and lean in and pay attention. In her case, people are looking around like, Where's that voice coming from?" But it really lands like the point that she's trying to make about you just don't know because it's so well hidden. So, Bernie, how do you start your speech?
Well, as I said, Laurie-Ann, I haven't been speaking a lot in recent years. Again, I was
Mhm.
active for a while. And when I was active, I was speaking mostly on marketing related topics
Mhm.
because vocationally, I've been in marketing for decades. So I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently. I have a plan. So when I begin speaking more actively on the topics related to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast,
Mhm.
I have a plan to experiment. Operative word here, Lorianne, is experiment
Yeah.
with the following opening. And that is, I have a question for you. And I don't want you to answer this question to anybody else but yourself in your head, not out loud, in your head. How fulfilled are you? Give it a number, a percentage, and make it an even number. Is it 10%, 50%, 80%, 90%, 100%? What's that number? And then I'm going to pause.
Okay, so I would rate that's like a B plus. I love the question. The question is very powerful, but you don't actually have to explain to the audience. You don't have to say it out loud. Because most people are going to, like, especially with a new audience, like, you have to invite them to actually participate. So the human brain just is going to naturally answer the question, but asking a question is a beautiful way to a open your keynote speech, open your signature speech. Couple of other ways that you could start a speech is with a startling statistic or a
Yeah.
quote. If you use a quote, here's the thing. You have to make sure that you also speak about it and tell the audience what that means. So, for example, one of the quotes that I use is Warren Buffett said that if you learn public speaking skills, you'll increase your value by 50%. If I
Okay.
left it there, everybody looks at Warren Buffett. He's the expert in the room. So what I do is I tell people what I believe is that if you learn public speaking skills, you will increase your bottom line by 87%.
Okay. I like it.
It's just enough. I've done some numbers, I've done some stats throughout people's careers or businesses. But what I'm doing is I'm taking like a statistic and people like, oh, wow, 50%. But then they hear my point of view and it's 87%.
Okay.
But again, all we're trying to do with that opening is to get people's attention.
Right.
Because if you lose their attention, oh,
Hook
good
them.
Lord.
You want to hook them.
Yes, we want to hook them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your third block is establishing your authority. And I would imagine that after you use your 87% stat, that you're going to back that up with your authority.
Yeah. Well, let me explain to the audience why I'm talking about these things in blocks. The reason why I encourage my students to build everything in blocks is because has a meeting planner ever come up to you, Bernie, and said, the guy before you, the woman before you, the speaker before you went over by 20 minutes. Can you cut your speech by 20 minutes? And now most of the people I did just like, yep, that's happened to me before. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it probably will at some point. But being able to take out a block, it's like, no problem. You as the speaker, your job is to make the meeting planner look like a rock star.
Hmm.
And the easier you are to work with. So I just teach people, like, you just take out a block, and it's usually going to be like maybe one of your teaching blocks. You just take out one of those points, and there you go. You just cut out maybe 15, 20 minutes. So your first block is your opening, the speaker confidence. That's how you have to do that before we even get on stage. So your speech has that first block is that attention grabbing opening. And your second block is your authority section. So the reason for the authority section is because your audience, you got them to lean in and listen to you and put their phones down. But this is what happens next. Your audience actually leans back, they fold their arms, and they say, yeah, but why should I listen to you? That's your authority section. You want to explain to them why you are in a position, why you're an expert on what you're about to speak on, and why they should continue to listen to you throughout the speech.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you 100% that the audience is thinking that. Why should I listen to you? So,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be your resume. We don't want you to read your resume. We just want you to give a little bits and pieces of what gives you the right to be sharing this information. And basically, you're telling the audience, this is why you should listen to me.
So maybe provide some guidance on how to do that because in most cases, someone, well, it depends on the venue, but in a lot of cases, you're introduced
Right.
and they're reading a bio. And of
Yes.
course, we all write our bios to sound fantastic.
Yes.
So, so how do you do that above and beyond a bio has already been either read
Mhm.
by the person introducing you or it's, in the program guide in front of them?
Yes. So you do your intro and then you want to have some sort of a transitional phrase. So my transitional phrase to go from my opening into my authority section is, in case we've never met, my name is Laurie-Ann and my nickname is LA. So please feel free to call me LA. I'm a reformed, painfully shy girl who couldn't even make eye contact. And I accidentally became a professional speaker. And then I would go into, like, I've written a couple of books. I've spoken for, like, some of my clients are Fortune 500 and 1000 companies. And I tell a little bit of the story of how I stepped off the stage from leadership. And now I help coaches, consultants, and service providers use speaking as their best form of marketing. And then I just have like another transition. I'm like, well, let's get on to the 3 tips that I'm going to share with you. Let's get on to the program. I'm excited to share. So,
Okay. So you just integrate it into your overall presentation,
mhm,
even if you're asked to cut something to make your presentation shorter, that's not the one you want to cut.
you don't want to cut that, but maybe you might pull out, like, mentally, you'll pull out, like, all right, I'm not going to use that line or that
Right.
phrase.
Right.
You start to trust yourself,
Yeah.
and so that you can do a really good job up there.
Yeah.
And again, nobody's going to know what you didn't say.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You just
And
gave me an idea, Lori. And so maybe
yeah,
I should experiment with like, I accidentally became a midlifer. Has that happened to you?
that's good. Humor is great. In the speaking world, we say the more they laugh, the more money you make.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Because
Well, I'm not a
like
comedian, so
humor actually breaks down the barrier that the audience has, and it actually encourages learning.
yep. Okay. Got it. Now, another one of your blocks in your 7 blocks is teaching, sharing, and showing value.
This is this is the good part. This is the teaching part. This is where you're actually adding value. So I kind of consider like your in-demand signature speech is like a sandwich. We have the bread, it's the meat that's in the middle, and that's what this value section is. This is what people came to hear. They want to walk away with something. So think of your value section as you can teach 3 points. And when I say 3 points, I'm thinking in a typical 45 to 55-minute speech. You have 3 points that you can teach the audience. And in those 3 points, I'm basically going to make you a lawyer. So I hope you like the law because, court lawyers have to defend their position. So each of your points, you're going to have 3 different points that are going to support that point. Does that make sense? 3 pieces of data. So that those pieces of
Okay.
data can be a story, a statistic, a study, you explaining, but there's 3 different pieces of information that support that point. So you got to put your lawyer hat on and you just have to defend and stick up for your point. Does that make sense?
Sure. So that's just something that I've always done in every presentation I've ever given, going all the way back to my 20s, and that's just show up prepared. So I
Yeah.
know what I want to teach, and I'm going to show up prepared with the facts, the figures, the information, even the storytelling along the way to support all of that. So am I oversimplifying it?
No, you're not. And the reason why I teach this is it's just 3 in a typical keynote speech so that you don't overteach. Because a lot of
Okay.
times people want to pack as much information into this talk as possible. And what you end up doing is you end up confusing the audience, overwhelming the audience, and then they don't do anything. And really all that's happening, because this is a problem that a lot of new speakers run into, they're trying to over teach and over deliver, is that you're just worried about your value. You're thinking that someone's going to think that if I don't put tons of information in here, that I don't know what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of self-doubt that
Right.
comes in. So the simpler it is, the more value the audience is going to get out of it. So 3 points, you can teach 3 points and 3 supporting data. So let's take one of yours.
You read my mind. I'm challenged by this because my brand new report, Thriving in Midlife, depending on when someone's listening to this, may just be publishing or may have already published, but it's publishing here in September 2024.
Mhm.
There's over 30 data points in there, Laurie-Ann. So I'm going to give you one. I'm going to give you
Okay.
one because, again, in the interest of time, and there's over 30 data points. I have to figure out which 3 I'm really going to focus on. But the one that I'm going
Well,
to
here's the
share,
thing. That's a data point, so that can support a point.
okay,
So what is one point that you would want to share in a midlife keynote? What do you want the audience to learn?
that fulfillment is soul level deep and it is immutable. And
Mm.
the data point that backs that up is in my Thriving in Midlife report, 80% of the people chose fulfillment over happiness when asked if hypothetically they could only be either fulfilled or happy. 80% chose fulfillment and 20% chose happiness.
I would choose the fulfillment also. So I think that data point, lets the audience know, if you chose fulfillment, you're in the majority. So it almost confirms to the audience, that's what everybody else is picking. So how do we get there? So that's actually a great lead into so how do you get fulfilled?
Mhm.
Or what's the difference between fulfillment and happiness?
Depending on whether or not I had 20 minutes taken out of my presentation, I would definitely go there because that is absolutely to your point, Laurie-Ann. That's exactly what people are thinking. Well, what is the difference? How do I know which one I'm going to choose? The short answer is fulfillment is more of an achievement. And again, it's soul level deep. Happiness is an emotion and it can come and go by the minute, by the day, by the hour.
Mhm.
So, so yeah. Okay. Then from there, I would get into the 5 pillars, but I don't want to digress too much because I don't want to take time away from your teaching here on these blocks, right? So we've been through the first 4 blocks: confidence, attention grabbing opening, establishing your authority, teaching and showing value. This next one here has always been a challenge for me, and that's seeds to selling. And if I
Mm.
may say why it's a challenge for me, because I always want the audience to feel like I did exactly in block number 4, shared, taught, showed
Mhm.
value. I
Mhm.
don't want the audience to ever feel like I was selling.
So most of the time when I'm like teaching in somebody's high-end mastermind or their membership where I'm teaching about, like how do you add like sprinkle little seeds of selling, they're very conversational. And I will highlight the fact that this is another part of the speech because I always want my clients and my students to step off the stage to more bookings. I want people to come up to you and like hand you their business card and say, I need to work with you. I have a group that I want you to come in and speak to, like that spin-off business. But the only way that that spin-off business happens is if you sprinkle those little seeds in there. Seeds like in my keynote on leadership, I talk about how emotional intelligence is, and then you go into it. Or, in my group program, In Demand Signature Speech, my clients learn how to structure their talk in a way that they get that spin-off business. We start with, and I might say, like in module 1, we talk about the foundation, and these are where people are setting goals. All it's doing is that the audience is sitting there going, oh, she's a coach. She works with clients. She works with
Mhm.
clients one-on-one. Now they're like, they might pick up their phone later on and they're just like, I gotta go like look up Laurie-Ann and look up in demand signature speech. Or a meeting planner is listening to you speak, Bernie, and they're nudging the other meeting planner sitting next to them and they're thinking, hey, we got a spring conference. We could bring him back to speak about leadership because that's what the whole conference is going to be about.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that wouldn't have happened if you just got up there and didn't sprinkle any seeds.
Thank you. Now, I
Mhm,
know because I've listened to your podcast that you did a few episodes on speaking in a corporate setting,
mhm.
speaking when you're employed at a company. So maybe you can speak to that same concept of seeds to selling when it's an internal thing. You're not an independent speaker looking to get booked by a meeting planner. You're doing it in a corporate setting.
Talk about a project that you worked on 2 years ago and how, this is really similar to the project we were working on last spring, whatever the name of that project was. When I worked at Johnson& and Johnson, maybe you're working for Merck right now. When I worked at Johnson& and Johnson, one of the leadership programs that we had available to us, like we learned about, I had the ability to like actually practice this when I was in this particular role. So you're still like able to plant those little seeds. You're basically talking about your past and your talents and your
Yeah.
skills that you have right now. And all it's doing in the corporate environment is, oh, yeah, that's right. She did work on that project. That was a very successful project. Or I didn't know that she was part of that project. I had no idea she worked for J&J.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. I like that. I like that. Okay. Block number 6 is a
Mhm.
masterful closing.
Yes, this is where you want to tie a nice pretty bow on your presentation. So just to let your audience know, there are 2 sections that I tell people that they should highly consider memorizing. One is your beginning, so your opening and your authority section, and also your close. So the reason for that is by memorizing that portion in the beginning, it gets over the butterflies. Like we all get a little bit of nervousness, the butterflies. And when you know exactly what you're going to say in those first couple of few minutes, the butterflies just kind of ease. Now, the reason for the close is I always want you to be the last thing that the audience hears. And I want to make sure that you also get your call to action in. So if the meeting planner asked you to cut your presentation short, if like you had a longer Q&A section, I want you to look up at a clock knowing my close 5 minutes. and you look up at the clock, and you're like, I have 6 minutes. So I know I could start my close. And then you are the last thing that the audience hears. So you're summarizing, but you're also making sure that you get your call to action in. What is it that you want the audience to do, to think, to feel differently after you're done speaking? When the applause is over, what do you want the audience to do?
I love that. So you're really thinking about the audience and specifically, there's two things you said that really resonate for me, Laurie-Ann. One is, what do you want them to do? And what do you want them to feel? You know, the old adage, people don't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you make them feel.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And so focusing in your close around how they're going to feel, that's powerful. That's a masterful close.
Yeah. And it comes down to like, we would set goals for the presentation. That's something that we would have set these goals for the audience and also for you before we even started putting your presentation together. I call us like, we are literally reverse engineering your speech. Where do you want the audience to think, to feel, to be? So we're working our way backwards. So in order for that to happen, what has to be in the speech? So if you do this really well, this is why it's an in-demand signature speech. Like the audience is going to want whatever your call to action is. It could be a lead magnet. It could be a Q&A call that's like a couple of weeks later. It could be signing up for a training that you have. Anything low cost or even free, or even just telling people about your podcast. Go and listen to this particular episode where I dive deeper into this. That's also a little seed for selling, by the way, Bernie.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to assess this little, I'm not going to call it a masterful closing, but how I want people to feel. I
Yeah.
have not shared this with you before. This is
No.
not planned or rehearsed, and that's very intentional, by the way. So of course, my whole podcast, my platform is based on the 5 pillars, right? Health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. And I say, don't chase fulfillment across your entire life. Chase it across each of those pillars distinctly. So I want people to feel like they can achieve fulfillment and not be overwhelmed by it, by understanding self-awareness that they should focus on each of those 5 pillars, know where they lack fulfillment, and then feel like they have a sense for where they can go focus on improving their fulfillment. So go ahead and rate me and be brutally honest on that.
Well, what would be your call to action?
Today, it would be access the Thriving in Midlife report, where there's lots of information that's both useful to individuals and to organizations, because the report talks a lot about the implications of each of these findings to employees and the organizational workplace.
Nice. So you want them to sign up for this?
To get the report. Yeah, to download the report.
And what are they going to get from this report?
Well, it is original research, so they're going to learn a lot about what makes people tick on this topic of fulfillment in midlife. And there's a lot in there around multi-generational, intergenerational dynamics among individuals and in the workplace. So it's a lot of just light bulbs that go off. It's just a lot of facts. So there's a deeper level of understanding of what people are struggling with, where they feel good and fulfilled, what they want more of, and the implications in the workplace.
I like it. I do like it. And I know that it's also a pretty meaty report.
It is.
So depending on who you're speaking to. So that might work really, really well with the right audience. But another one that's almost on the other end of the spectrum could be a quiz.
Yes.
A quiz so that people could figure out where are they in regards to their fulfillment. Maybe they think like, yeah, I feel like I'm like health is a priority, but maybe they don't eat well. They, like if you had a couple of questions. So a quiz is a great call to action from a stage too.
Yeah, I know you had an episode on that, and I listened to that very intently and really took a lot out of it and made a note to myself of that's something that I want to do in the future. However, I
Mhm.
do have a scorecard.
Perfect.
I would not call it a quiz. I wouldn't
But
call it a quiz.
that's but it's a little bit fun. So you've got the very meaty report over here, which is gonna be perfect for certain audiences, depending on who it's appropriate for. And then just to have, like, something else to pull out of your back pocket, the scorecard would be
Right,
great.
right, right.
So then
Okay,
people are like, like, "Check, check." And what I like about the scorecard is that's something that you could quickly pass out, like, get a couple of like, in an in-person event, get a couple of volunteers, they pass out the scorecard, but your information's on the bottom of that paper.
yeah,
And it doesn't
yeah,
have to be like a giant scorecard. You can get them printed rather inexpensively. And then online, if you're speaking virtually, you can just tell people like, go here and download this, make
yeah.
a copy of this, and now you have your scorecard. But it's a beautiful way for them also to walk away with your information and you get their email address because how else are they getting the scorecard?
Right. And I should say, shameless shout out here. I mean, the scorecard is on the Midlife Fulfilled website, so it's available to anybody who's listening here. But let's get closer to wrapping here because the last one is
Mm.
speaking tips to look like a pro. And I want to actually tell you a very quick story. I was 27 years old. I was early in my sales career, working for a big company. We were doing a seminar, and this is a long time ago. Webinars did not exist. The internet did not
Mhm.
exist. Okay, I'm taking you back to the mid '80s. So I'm a young salesperson, and I'm doing my first corporate presentation. It was a marketing presentation, and I had
Mhm.
a key role. There were three speakers. I was one of them. We rehearsed and all that. So I delivered my presentation, and then the other two speakers delivered theirs. And there was 100 or so people in the audience. And afterwards, I went to my boss, and I went to her, and I just loved her to death. I respect her tremendously. I looked up to her as like a mentor, and I said, her name was Barbara and she went by BJ because her last name was Jean, Barbara Jean. So she went by BJ. I said, BJ, I was so nervous. How did I do? And she said to me, I'll never forget this. She said, Bernie, if you were nervous, you're the only one who knew it. You looked calm as can be.
That's good. That's
That was
very good.
life changing. I'm telling you, it was life changing. So just that's my little quick story on speaking tips to look like a pro because she told me I look like a pro, even though I didn't feel it in the moment.
And how wonderful for her to tell you that.
Yes.
Even if, like, I'm just gonna be honest here, even if it wasn't true, she probably knew, like, if I tell him, well, like, I could tell, but, like, we'll work on it. You would remember that, and the next
Right.
time you got up there in front of people, it would be like, "Oh my goodness." I mean, I have a client that I'm working with, and she took too much advice from other people on her speech,
Mm,
and she works for a large company, and they just wanted to find out they wanted her to teach, like, how did you grow your area so quickly? And unfortunately, she got too much input, and it really like, her speech wasn't authentic, it wasn't her. So what I said to her, I said,
right.
"You need a better memory." And that's what Barbara did for you. She gave you a great memory, and just to hear you say, like, it was life-changing,
Yeah.
absolutely life-changing. So, one of the tips, that I always give people because I wanna give you the, like, here are the tips that are gonna give you the biggest bang for your buck. Learn how to pause. You do not have to speak the entire 45 minutes, like speaking like really fast and making sure you get all that information in because all you're going to do is exhaust the audience. And then again, you don't want to speak too slow. But when you do ask a question, you want to pause, give the audience space to answer it mentally, give the audience time to just think from time to time. It really like pausing is so powerful. So I would say pausing and get there early. This is for in person and also for virtual events, but more with in person events. Get there early and welcome people. Shake their hands, thank them for coming. Hey, what compelled you to join this session? Now you're not speaking to a room full of strangers, but a room full of potential friends
Mhm,
because you've already
mhm.
had if you've already said hi to them. and the audience doesn't know what you forgot to say. Anything that you take out, they won't know.
That's right. That's a key point, Laurie-Ann.
Yeah.
That's a key point because we tend to beat ourselves up. Something that I was taught many years ago is to make eye contact with different people in the audience.
Mhm.
Obviously, virtual, you can't do that, but when you're speaking live in front of a group of real people, that's something that I embrace doing, and I would get good feedback from it. And I don't mean verbal feedback, like "Hey, thanks for the eye contact." It was just like the interaction was really
Yeah.
good because of the eye contact.
Well, you can do that virtually. It's called look in the camera. One of the best compliments I ever got when the world had to go very virtual, I had somebody actually in the chat say, "You have the best eye contact." I was like,
Yeah,
thank you so much. That meant the world to me. But look in the camera when you're speaking virtually. And for in-person events, it's a theater term. And in the National Speakers Association, what we say is, honor the cheap seats first. So when you're going to the theater, the seats that are way in the back, those are the lower ticket prices compared to the orchestra seats. So like look in the back of the room. Just acknowledge those people and bring your eyes forward. So
yeah,
that all comes down under the eye contact as well.
yeah. That's
And
great.
I'll add one more. It's okay for you to end a few minutes early. Don't go a few minutes over time.
Right.
It's disrespectful to the audience. It's disrespectful to the event. I have seen speakers who got up there, they were speaking and then they turned to the coordinator and said, "How much longer do I have?" "You have 10 minutes. They spoke fast and ended 15 minutes later. And all
Wow.
you could see is like the audience was like packing their bags because they had places to go. So end
Yeah,
early,
and
don't end late.
yeah, what I would add to that is the audience knows the difference between an experienced speaker and an inexperienced speaker. And you
Mm.
just gave an example of an inexperienced speaker who
Yes.
just doesn't know enough to not go over like that. So yeah.
Yes.
Lorianne, I feel like you've done a little masterclass here on how to build your in-demand signature speech. How about a closing thought that kind of ties a little bow on all of it?
Oh my goodness, it's really hard, in under an hour to actually teach everything that I've learned in 25 years of professional speaking. So I would just like guide people to like it's true that I'm a reformed painfully shy girl. So I accidentally became a professional speaker, and I share that because I want people to understand that I taught my nervous system new tricks, and you can teach yourself new tricks. That's how I like to refer to it. But you're learning something new. So if you feel like, "Oh, yeah, but I'm afraid of speaking," it really will open up so many doors of opportunity for you. So I want to encourage you to do that. And like Bernie said, he loves my podcast. So I would say, go listen to my podcast. It's
Absolutely,
a
and
form of
that's a great
speaking.
no, that's a great segue. So where can people get into your world? Just all the places where people can connect with you and of course include your podcast.
Thank you. Well, the main hub is speakandstandout.com. And if you prefer to follow me on LinkedIn, there's links there or Instagram or over to my podcast, which is called Be in Demand. And I would just send you all to my website and you can just decide on how you would like to follow and consume information. And there's a couple of lead magnets that are there. If you're unsure how to get started, there's a directory of places to speak. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about those seeds, I call them magic phrases. That's also available over on the website as well.
You do a masterful job of really providing a lot of really, really useful information on this whole topic of speaking. So I commend you for that, Lorianne.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for joining me for this maximum episode. You've really brought the maximum to this episode. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to listening to more of your podcast and just consuming your content on an ongoing basis.
Thank you very much, Bernie. That I love what you're doing here. I love your podcast because I'm a listener as well. Keep up the good work. The world needs you.
Thank you.